Hi, Dr. Wills. I have a few interview questions for you today. This is Dr. Wills. Would you mind starting with just your position at Siloam?
Yes, I'm Morgan Wills. I'm President and CEO at Siloam Health and also a staff internal medicine physician.
Great. So the first question on here is, what part of your personal biography or background led you to this position?
You broke up a little bit, but I heard what part of my personal background led to this position.
Yes.
It helps
Sorry.
Wi-Fi connection.
Oh, I don't know why it's doing this. Yes. What part of your personal biography or background led you to be in this position?
Yeah. Well, certainly my background in healthcare was a piece of what led me to be in this position. As a practicing physician, I have a on-the-ground understanding of what we do at Siloam Health, but I was not trained or sort of developed in the administrative side of healthcare. So that is a little unusual for a practicing physician to assume the role of CEO of a nonprofit. Not unheard of, but just a little less common. But I think from the further background in my life that prepared me for this, certainly it was growing up as a longtime resident of Nashville and having a deep love for the community, mixed with an experience I had overseas after college, living and serving in West Africa in a Christian medical mission environment that was indigenously led. So I was the only American, only white person there. It was an African-led healthcare ministry there that I served at. And I was not planning to go into medicine at that time, but I encountered God's power and presence in my life in a way that put me on a path towards really seeking an alternative vocation. And if I hadn't had that experience, I'm not sure I ever would have pursued work at a place like Siloam.
How long were you in Africa?
3 months in Ghana and 5 months total in Africa, and about 9 months total abroad traveling with a backpack.
Wow, I did not know about that. That's so cool. So that kind of answers part of the next question, but what cultural identities or experiences are most salient for you?
Yeah, so the reiterating, I'm a 9th generation Nashvilleian, so my cultural identity is as a Southern Middle Tennessean from a long way back, with Anglo roots to England, and then really that experience abroad after college. And then about 4 summers I spent during medical school doing an inner city vaccination campaign and a door-to-door ministry campaign in Philadelphia, working primarily in a Puerto Rican neighborhood with an inner city health center. That was very formative for me and kind of furthered that comfortability, bridging a cultural and socioeconomic divide. So that was another way of bringing that experience from Africa to home in this country, and then volunteering at Siloam as a medical student and a resident became an outlet for me to sort of bridge those worlds.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that is incredible. What experiences would you say have most shaped you as a leader?
What would I say has most shaped me as a leader?
Yes, like which specific experience?
Yeah. Probably my time leading those projects in med school. That was the most formative stage. When you're in your 20s, you're hitting that era of life. I had not married and settled down yet, and I had more margin free time to give. And I was involved in some pretty intentional formation relationships with mentors in the context of those summer projects in the campus ministry at Vanderbilt Medical School. And I had a chance to pour into the lives of some younger students during that decade of my 20s. So in many ways, the practical lessons in leadership I learned through that ministry and through those cross-cultural projects have shaped me for a lot of the work I do at Siloam. Now, I've learned a ton more on the job here and been blessed to have a great mentor and predecessor in this role in Nancy West. And she taught me a lot in the way she led an organization. Which is slightly different than just leading individuals.
Yeah. This question kind of goes along with what you had mentioned earlier, especially since we come from the same faith background. But the question is, were you called into leadership, or did you seek it because of held convictions? So like, if you want to go into this even further, just from like a Christian aspect or whatever, that's totally fine.
In particular, it's the short, and I feel like my convictions prepared me to respond to the invitation. And boots on. You turn it back on. Are we recording again now?
I think so. I'm so sorry. It like kicked me out of the meeting.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. If your Wi-Fi is an issue, you can also reboot and pick it up another time too. So in terms of, I was just saying, my role as CEO, I did not seek out. My board pursued me. I gave them 3 reasons I thought it was a bad idea, including, I wasn't good at it. Yeah, at least what I saw my predecessor doing. She was a phenomenal manager and, detail person. And and also I was a physician, so I would kind of have a split interest and responsibilities. And then third, I thought God had been calling me to spend more time with my family, not less. So for me to really sense that this was actually an opportunity God had for me to grow me as an individual, as well as to help the organization. So I involved actually meeting with a spiritual director for a month with me and my wife, each going through some prayer and scripture exercises, and then sort of coming back together at the end of that month. And then looking at the whole request with a new set of eyes after that process. So
yeah, that's a really cool way to look at it too. How have you learned from the obstacles and challenges you faced?
Gosh, what have I not learned? I think to pick out a few themes or threads, maybe. We have faced financial challenges in terms of big impacts on our earned revenues. About 5 years ago, when the refugee revenue source, of course, the pandemic posed unique financial and logistical. There've been a lot in between, but I think one of the key lessons is that you can't build trust in a crisis. So the trust you build through the small acts of faithfulness, service, leadership, day in, day out over time, show up when you need them in terms of other people who trust you and vice versa. And for instance, I mentioned earlier that I did not feel particularly administratively gifted. I could see the big picture. I could help cast a vision and move it forward, but I really perceived weaknesses in ability to bring closure to ideas, and quantitative, training in terms of the finances, operational training, aspects of fundraising and development, which I didn't feel I was particularly good at. And so in all those areas, I've recognized the need to depend on other people. And so probably the greatest gift I've given to my organization has been finding and creating space for other good people who bring gifts that I don't have. And so, yeah, named through the people I hired to help us fulfill our mission.
Yeah. Well, this isn't actually a question on my list, but when I know that Siloam, like a big part of what you all do is to provide like affordable healthcare for like the refugee population in Nashville. So how does that work in terms of like the financial aspect? Because I know you talked about having to like build that trust before and stuff. So how does that work?
Yeah. Well, there's several different models of health centers for the underserved even. On the one end of the continuum are free clinics, that might just be open on a weekend in a church basement. And for all intents and purposes, the way Siloam started was kind of like that. It was just open Monday nights, Saturday mornings. $2 would get you in the door. Nobody would be turned away for ability to pay. So that's basically free. And so what you're relying on there is here.
I don't know why the Wi-Fi is so bad in this building.
You on again?
Yeah. I came to the building where I thought there would be good Wi-Fi and apparently it's not any better. So I might just turn off my video because that seems to not hurt. So, but I'm still here even if you can't see me.
And where did you hear me stop, cut out?
I heard you saying we started with no one will be turned away, $2.
Yeah. And so at the other end of that continuum are federally qualified health centers that get large federal grants and increase reimbursement rates to care for the uninsured. And in between are what we call charitably funded clinics, which are not free, but they are largely subsidized by charitable donations. And that's where Siloam falls out. We do get a modest reimbursement from the state of Tennessee for every 18 to 65-year-old patient we see. But that's maybe $20 per patient, 25 at most.
Oh, okay.
When the average cost of a visit is $150, $160 per visit. So patients contribute on a sliding scale at Siloam. So the Melrose Clinic, which has been the longest running clinic we own, and where your father served on the board. Once somebody has been screened and qualified, they'll be able to be seen on a sliding scale and pay anywhere from $20 to $50, $60, but the vast majority just pay $20 for the visit plus any lab fees that they have. That still obviously won't pay for most of a visit. So we fundraise for about 2/3 of every dollar we spend on healthcare at Siloam. The good news is that provides up to 4 or 5 times the amount of healthcare that for the investment, just because of all the volunteers, the in-kind services, either given or made available to our patients, and the way we can leverage community resources. So
Wow.
charitably funded care model is how we operate, and individuals are the biggest group of donors, then foundations, then churches and businesses after that.
Okay, gotcha. What would you say your professional strengths or weaknesses are?
Yeah, well, professional strength would be an understanding of the frontline impact of our services on patients. So, being a practicing physician myself, I can see how the decisions in the boardroom trickle down to impact the lives of patients. Similarly, I bring a sense of vision about what's happening in the community, and an ability, an innate ability to go out and bring resources. That's sort of an orientation for me, whether it's people or funding opportunities or benefits for our patients.
Yeah.
My challenges or weaknesses as a leader are, I've alluded to them before, but I am not a particularly good manager. I'm better on starting things than on following through on them. And that's why I need, I submit to and report to a board of directors. Not only is that the best governance, for an organization that's a nonprofit, but it gives me accountability, gives me, a deadline and people I know I want to, be accountable to, and with our goals for the year and stewarding our resources. But I'll think about my team detail, enjoy developing processes. I would be really challenged. So some of my weaknesses are just in that middle management realm, where I really rely on a team to provide that for the benefit of the organization. I think I'm also somewhat conflict avoidant. And so you'll inevitably have conflict in any team. And that's something I've really had to work on, is sort of leaning into uncomfortable situations, and not, postponing or avoiding those conversations until I feel fully adequate to respond to them. So you're never fully prepared to make all the decisions you want to make in a leadership role. And I like to be about with all the grasp on the issues, and in reality to be 60, maybe 70% prepared.
Okay, so that kind of does help with the next question, which is, how do you measure success and how do you learn from failure?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I love about working at Siloam, our mission statement is to share the love of Christ by serving those in need through healthcare. So that's the lens through which I view all of my work, my team's work. It's broad, it's not super granular, but at the end of the day, it revolves more around the concept of faithfulness than success to me. So I think primarily in those categories. Lord, have I been faithful with the job you've entrusted to me today or this year? And we leave the outcomes up to Him. And so in terms of sharing the love of Christ, it's hard to quantify how well we do that. We try different ways to sort of survey patients and staff, to assess their need, biopsychosocial. And so those are some measures we do. Partners in the, around like the outcomes for groups of patients with diabetes. of us filling, for the day. And we report out on some of these to various committees of the board. So there are some more measurable outcome measurements. But at the end of the day, it's about loving.
Sorry, I actually did hear what you're saying. I'm not exactly sure why it kicked me out that time.
Yeah, well, it seems to kick you back in pretty fast.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. So I think I covered that.
I love that. I love that Siloam is like founded on sharing the love of Christ. I think that's a really cool aspect of it and what you guys do. What are 2 or 3 action steps that you believe are essential to enable others to be successful?
2 or 3 action steps for others to be successful, sort of general principles, or
yes, I think like more in terms of like to be successful or like to be a leadership position.
Mm-hmm. I think you got to know yourself as the first thing, and we get to know our radical honesty. Through living in community, transparent, relating, and trying new things. So for somebody in their 20s or 30s, often it's about just trying a lot of different opportunities to serve, to lead, to make yourself go to where the need is and show up. Showing up is half the battle.
Yeah.
And in the process, you get to know yourself if you allow the feedback, if you allow yourself to learn from failures or just hear or observe your impact on others. So the more you can get to know yourself, and I think doing that in the context of just serving, like I said, going to where the need is. And sometimes you find the calling comes to you as you enter into various needs. And they don't all have to be, socioeconomic poverty, like our patient population faces. There are different types of needs, in the culture and society, and your training, different leaders, training backgrounds and interests will lead them into different places. But there's brokenness out there.
Right.
And learning along the way would be 2 really important action steps I'd recommend.
Okay, those are really encouraging. Thank you. I know you touched on this earlier about building trust, but what advice do you have for building relationships and trust in an organization?
Yeah. Well, we talk about giving whole person care to patients as our sort of philosophy of care. And if we're not doing that with one another, then it will inevitably seem inauthentic or come back to bite you. So I would say, bring your whole self to work. Don't be afraid to get to know the whole person and the person sitting next to you, your boss, anybody reporting to you, your colleagues. So that doesn't mean you spend all your day at the water cooler talking about Saturday Night Live, but it might mean you do that for, the beginning of a meeting or in between. It's really, we try and encourage teams to get to know one another outside of work, and or to create third spaces where they can do that safely and have some natural margin, to build relationships. That's the glue that holds a team together. And so just like a piece of paper that you're writing on for a presentation is not filled up all the way to the margin. It's not covered with black ink. In fact, the most effective presentation deliberately leaves margins both between paragraphs and around them, and highlights and emphasizes certain words versus others. And the same for the way you structure your work life. If you don't leave that margin, there's no air circulating oxygen, if you will, for the teamwork and collaboration to happen. And so that's hard for many of us in America who are just, in many ways, workaholics or sort of driven, and feel like, we can't relax the throttle. Really,
Right.
the art of working well and effectively and sustainably is knowing when and how to relax the throttle, so that you can go longer together.
That's really good. This question, in my opinion, is kind of a tough one, but what do you want your legacy to be as a leader or just in general?
Yeah. Well, my hope would be, at a really simple, John the Baptist would become less so that it become greater.
Yeah.
And so if people were left more in love with Christ, and becoming more like him because of their time with me, then I would consider that quite a success. If there was a particular way in which I could help bring that about, that they remembered and cherished, yeah, that'd be fun too. But ultimately, what will make the greatest impact in people's lives is of the source, and just critical to do that. I don't think you have to be out and do that. Just day-to-day work and life together are avenues to point people towards the love of God in their lives. So
Yeah.
my hope would be that people left loving and knowing him more because of my role in their life.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Thank you. I had two more personal questions that I had come up with. And the first is just, what is your favorite part of working at Siloam?
Oh, it's easy. That's the people. So where else can I spend time caring for a woman, middle-aged woman from Egypt, a Ugandan man whose son is on scholarship at Michigan State playing football, a 80-year-old Korean woman who hasn't seen a doctor in 32 years living in the United States and now is most concerned about caring for her 101-year-old mother, and an Afghan refugee, all in the same afternoon, with the help of a medical resident from Ethiopia, a nurse from Cuba, and who come from all over the world, and just bring all kinds of rich experiences and laughter and gifts. So I love the people. That's the easily the top thing about my job.
Wow. Well, that kind of leads
What was the
right
other
into,
question?
oh, sorry. That kind of led right into it, actually, what you were saying, because the last question I had is, do you even think of what you do as a job, or is it more than that because of the people you get to help?
It's definitely a job. I think even in optimal circumstances, the things that you do and love to do and would do regardless in your job, you're lucky if that's over 50%. You're really lucky if it's 70 or 80%. So I would say a majority of my job is like that. There are parts of my job that I would rather not do. A lot of it preparing for different committee meetings and learning about electronic medical record system documentation. And, I could list a series of things that I probably wouldn't naturally do every day. But I'm so grateful to come alongside this team every day, be reconnected to the love of God through the practices we do together, and to be a part of something bigger than myself, and
Yeah.
times like COVID-19, were just real big opportunities to realize, oh, wow, God's got a purpose for us, and we're here. Everybody else is shutting down, but we're going to show up and be open and risk, disease if we need to, but try to be a part of the solution for the city. building on all the good things that have happened in the past.
Yeah.
So it's a delightful place to work.
Oh, I love hearing that. Thank you so much for your time and for doing this. It like inspires me to hear about Siloam and what you guys are doing there. It makes me wish I was a doctor, honestly, because that's just really cool.
Yeah, well, it takes all types, right? I mean, and we're hiring for a new volunteer coordinator and a director of spiritual care and a community health worker, and a
Wow.
nurse, and a development position. So there's all kinds of things that go into doing healthcare. It's not just the people in the white coat, but that's a fun part of it for sure.
Right. Well, thank you so
Well,
much for your time. I really, really appreciate you doing this.
You're welcome, and thank you for asking.
Of course.